Welcome back to episode 3 of Writing in the Raw. Really excited for today's episode. We're going to go through the second part of this chapter, which is fun. We're going to meet Paz, one of our characters. I'm going to talk about one of the books that I'm reading. And in addition to, we're going to talk about endings. I know it's premature to talk about endings in the context of where I am in the story. I think currently, I looked it up actually in Pages, and I think we're at 68,000 words for this, which is cool. Who cares? I don't really put stock in words, except that certain genres like a certain length of book, if you're going to get into like high fantasy that's outside of like a high adult fantasy, you better be putting out a chunky book. Patrick Rothfuss comes to mind. There's a ton of just J.R. Martin, you big fat chunky doorstop books is what you need to be shooting for, because that's what your genre wants. So know that before getting into things. If you're just starting out writing and you're like, I have this really good fantasy story and I'm going to do this, but I think I can tell the story in 200 pages. It's like, maybe a kid's story. Maybe you grab those characters and dumb them down a little bit, or do something with humor or throw it in sci-fi is a little bit shorter typically if you're doing stuff like that. But just my 2 cents there. Before you start writing something, know what's expected of the genre, and then shoot for that. And I think that's why we're going to talk about endings really quickly. So really quickly, what makes a good ending? What makes a good ending is you as a creator, as a storyteller, knowing what your audience is caring about. That's it in a nutshell. If you hit those briefs, if you're writing a rom-com and you're like, I don't think that my audience cares whether or not the main character gets together with the other main character, and that's why they're there. Like, my wife watches rom-coms all the time, and like they're all going to end up together like at the end, and there's going to be that moment, and it's so formulaic, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I used to rage against that in my 20s when I was going to be an author. I used to rage against the formula of storytelling, and now I just see it as this comforting scaffolding. You can bend it, you can fudge it. Like I said last time, I'm going through Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer, and there's a great example of just bashing the scaffolding of stories, but he keeps some of them intact and uses them very, very effectively towards the end of the book. But at the beginning, it's just this little bop, 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 bop. It's like driving over a potholed road when you're trying to start that book out. Really, really interesting the way that he chooses to do that. So endings in a nutshell. Know what your audience cares about and address those things. I'll give you 2 examples, one a really good ending and one a really bad ending. And again, I have a huge background and love of film. I could talk books. I thought about talking books, but then I thought this was just easier. And know that I'm getting older. Like, I recognize that these 2 films are dated. They're in the early millennium. Anyone who was born at that time watching this is going to be like, huh? Put both of these films on your list and put one of them on your list. Anyway, so Hero, the Chinese film with Jet Li, is one of my favorite films of all time. I think Michelle Yeoh's in that one too. Is she? I can't remember. I think she might be. I could look that up really quickly. Hold, please. Bum, bum, bum. Hero film. Let's see what we got. Maggie Chung's in it. Donnie Yen's in it. Tony Leung is in it. Jet Li, of course. I mean, there's so many good. Okay, so maybe she isn't in this film. Zhang Ziyi, just amazing. Phenomenal film. This film right here. Watch this film. It is just amazing. Anyway, the main character goes through his whole journey and fights all these different people and sits before the emperor. And this is pretty spoiler free. No, it's not. This is not spoiler free. At the end, I'll try to do this spoiler free. At the end, he sacrifices something for the good of the empire and has a change of heart. And it's sublime because you as the audience, you care about him as a character. You care for his health, his well-being, and more importantly, you care for his mission. He's giving his whole life to train to accomplish his mission. And when the ending comes, you are just left speechless, in awe, and just like, yes, that needed to happen. It is a masterpiece. If you haven't seen it, phenomenal film. One of my top 10 films. So The Matrix, all three of The Matrix, I don't think the new one's canon. It's not, in the same way anything new Star Wars is not canon. I couldn't care less. I have my Star Wars. I'm good. I'm done. Anything new Lord of the Rings is not canon. I don't care. I have my original 3 films, and 15 hours of watching there with the extended versions. Thanks, Peter Jackson. All the new stuff I couldn't care less about. I just genuinely couldn't. The Matrix, the way that it ends, and this will be spoiler. If you haven't seen the first Matrix, absolutely see it. It's wonderful. It's one of my favorite films of all time. Also, one of my favorite dialogues of all time in dialogue scenes in film comes from the second movie, which is a garbage film just in general. Overall, it's garbage, but there's a really, really cool scene in there of dialogue, and I adore dialogue. We'll talk about dialogue later on, but I have such a strong background. Like in high school, all I was reading was plays because I was so ADHD. I couldn't read anything very long or like any heavy exposition. I was just like, ugh, and my brain would just start imagining things that I'd rather be doing, and it was just awful. But plays I could do. So I adore dialogue. I think it's phenomenal, which is funny because my story doesn't really start out with dialogue. A lot of internal dialogue. Maybe that's how I'm cheating and keeping my crazy brain going. That could very well be why I like internal monologue. It's kind of crutchy. I'll admit that, just straight up. It's kind of crutchy. It is telling, not showing. I get it, but I think it's fun. It adds humor. It adds levity, and it gives you an opportunity to connect with this character. So back to The Matrix. The way that it ends, Neo gives his life to save the city. I was about to say Babylon, but that's not true. Zion. He gives his life to save Zion, which is great and wonderful and poignant and sacrificial, and again a picture of it's like Jesus on the cross type thing. He's even like, I think he's even like on the like in a crucifix position or something when he dies, which is fun. Visual parallels there. Here's the catch. What Jesus did actually mattered. What Hero, the main character of Hero, Nameless, I don't think he has a name in that film, mattered. And in this one, it's made abundantly clear in the second film that this has happened, that the one rises up, resets the Matrix, and they do it again. The one rises up, resets the Matrix, and does it again. So he rises up, you care about him, you follow him from a lowly hacker sitting alone in his apartment, all the way up to this, he is the one, this is Neo, and then he dies, and then it just resets and carries on. And that ending was, because as an audience, you cared about the character. You didn't care about the lore or the rules that the lore had to follow. Thus, it was a bad ending. So for endings, when you're shooting your trajectory, ask yourself, what does my audience care about? And this is great because having this dialogue, right, you can shoot me comments and be like, I really care about this character. I really think that this character should end up with this other character. That's the point of Paz. The point of Paz in this is not just comic relief in an already humorous thing, but adventure, but he's going to come along with us in the adventure, and he's going to be a MacGuffin love interest for our main character. And we're going to care about him, and we're going to care about our main character as we go along. But you get to tell me, hey, I actually cared a lot more than you think I did, and then that's awesome. And then I get to readjust to that. It's not going to be perfect, and I really want this love interest to be so genuine that you could be like, no, I could see them getting together. I could see them being good together, and that's the difference. I really want, if there is a MacGuffin, I want it to be a good MacGuffin. I want it to be something that you're like, no. This, if I were telling this story, I could write fan fiction about these two getting together, which is that's not like a prideful people are going to do that type thing. That's just me saying that's the target, right? I don't anticipate anyone. I mean, if this thing ever got published, the audience would be very small indeed, and I recognize that. So we're going to continue on because we write because we must. We write because we are mining and unearthing things in our own souls. Here we are. We start with the green because that's what I decided to use as a differentiator. Whoa! Yes, just highlight the entire work. Okay, recently used. White is good. Okay, Paz's plays were always worth the price of admission. Not that Hannah had ever paid admission. There had to be some perks to being the playwright's sister's best friend. And hadn't Hannah paid for the tickets during all the years when Paz would make her play the love interest in his endless backyard theater sessions when they were kids. I do want to know, yeah, there's an I in that word. I do want to know in the comments if so right now we've got lots of names. We've mentioned a beer. We've mentioned Paz. Wait, we haven't mentioned a beer. We might mention a beer in this one. So we've mentioned Paz, we've mentioned Salome, we're going to mention Ruta and a beer. So we have 4 foxes that we haven't met yet, and I'm trying to keep this small because I have like 3 notebooks, big giant notebooks of drawings and notes and characters and stuff, and I'm actually cutting characters out. I had a really funny turtle in Seth's story. Tortoise, because he's in the desert. You have to do your research. A really funny tortoise because I thought that Seth's story was too depressing and too slow and too whiplashy. But then I thought, the heck with it. I really like that. That's the point. It's writing about a fox in the desert. You're going to love Paz. If you don't love Paz, I still love you. But you should love, you're going to love Paz. He's just so relatable. He's so, you root for Paz. I root for Paz. I'm always like, I'm sorry, buddy, whenever he gets hurt, and he gets hurt a lot. Gets hurt, I'll punch him back. Anyway, carry on. Paz. Romeo and Juliet. That's wrong. I didn't, there we go. So I was going to put Romeo and Juliet here, but then I thought it was too, wow, I'm really on the struggle bus with this mouse. Let's use this mouse because this mouse is better. I never use my trackpad unless it's for scrolling. There we go. Hannah was always the love-struck fox who drank the poison. Anytime there was, so what am I trying to say here? I had like Romeo and Juliet in there because it was super relatable, but then I thought, nah, let's not break the world. I think Terry Pratchett does that a lot of times where he'll just break the world. He'll talk about like Post-its notes or world's best, or like paperclips. He talks about like paperclips and like world's best boss and stuff like that when it's a story based in whatever medieval times, for all intents and purposes, not medieval times, like the 1700s, although they have Raising Steam, which is about a troll who, not troll? Anyway, about a creature who makes a train. Phenomenal book. So he does that. He breaks that. And every time he breaks it, I'm kind of like, eh. So I had this in here because I was just writing a rough draft, and I was like, just put something in there. Like Romeo and Juliet, everyone knows that story. So let's think about this for a second. Hannah was always the love-struck fox who drank the poison, though in this case it was a vial of water with mashed mint leaves in it. Any princess locked in a tower or banished by a stepmother was reluctantly played by Hannah. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this sentence here, take it out, put it up top, because they say the same thing, right? Any princess locked in a tower or banished by a stepmother was reluctantly played by Hannah. Hannah was always the love-struck fox who drank the poison, though in this case it was a vial of water with mashed mint leaves in it. Paz's sister, Salome, was stuck with being the wrinkled old witch, stepmom with an allergy to compassion, or evil aunt. Paz would always end up yelling at Salome because she wasn't evil enough. Not in love with this sentence. This always, always, always. I feel like I'm doing always a lot. Here's always. Though in this case, 5 was stuck. So I have always twice here, and I don't like it. Paz would usually end up yelling at Salome because she wasn't evil enough. Salome with conviction does the jealous wench push her rival again, this time harness the rage of a spurned lover fraught with images of her beloved in the clutches of this fair-furred vixen. Are you okay, Hannah? Salome said, rushing to help her best friend to her paws. Yeah, I'm fine. I just tripped. Nay, Paz yelled from across the yard. Frivolities must cease when jaded friends are fit to thrust their unsuspecting. He trailed on. Hannah and Salome looked at Paz. As usual, the over-gesticulating fox flapped and squawked as he pontificated something about internal rage and the 1,000 bee stings of being born with a beating heart. They looked at each other and laughed. But hadn't that been the start? Some foxes just know deep in their marrow that what they want to do for the rest of their lives. Paz was that fox, and Hannah wasn't. But here was Paz, a staple of Snowwall at only 21 reigns of age. Though Hannah knew that Paz, bless his little art-loving heart, was convinced that foxes of Snowwall were cultured, refined, and with an appreciation of theater akin to their fondness of complaining about the hounds, boozing, or digging white rock from the belly of the mountain. But Hannah knew the truth, and the truth was without a golden glow. You'd be hard-pressed to find a sober fox who wasn't at his plays, just waiting for what would inevitably go wrong. Yikes, that's hard. Waiting for what would inevitably go just waiting for what would inevitably go wrong. It was like a chariot race. It was like chariot racing in that regard. You watched for the crash. At Paz's Playhouse, something always went wrong. There'd been that fantastic production about Sinan. This is your world, bro. You can pronounce this however you want, Benjamin. Let's try. Sinan? I really feel like that's Sinan. There had been that fantastic production about Sinan the Great's naval victory against a ship of marauding northern weasels, which went well until one of the stagehands, apparently really getting into the spirit of things, doused the stage lights with a bucket of water. The show, as Paz was always fond. The show, as Paz was always fond. The word is fond. The show, as Paz was always fond of reminding any fox within earshot, must go on, and so it did. Though without torches, it was less Sinon the Great defeats the sea weasels and more blurry smudges walking around on stage, saying things really loudly until the lead fell headlong into the mayor's wife's lap. Into the mayor's wife's lap. Really hard. A lot of W's in here. And I struggle with W's, apparently. We are going to stop here for 2 reasons. One, because I hear my son coming from down the stairs. And I am going to just pause this real quick because I think I can finish this. Okay. He is down, but he's in his other room. So I did promise, let's first, but Hannah knew the truth, and the truth was without a golden glow. Okay. Great things really loudly until the lead fox fell headlong into the mayor's wife's lap. On the whole, Hannah gave the whole production, there's whole twice, gave the production, there we go. On the whole, Hannah gave the production a glowing review, but then again, life was hard, and laughing so hard you cried was worth the time. Okay, and then we're going to come back to Hannah with the ooze, because we've talked about the ooze before, and I think it's a great place to tie back to in our reader's mind. It's really hard to jump back and forth if you're doing time, not travel, but if you're jumping back and forth from present to memories to things that could happen. But if you have firm little grips, for them to latch onto in the memory, something memorable. It's good. So I told you I was going to read an excerpt from a book that I'm reading right now, and it is indeed The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, written in the 1800s. I could look it up. It was probably up there. Let's see what it says. It says 1876, which is crazy, and it's still amazing, phenomenal. So I thought it would be a crime for you to listen to me for 3 weeks in a row without having a real author's voice in our heads and minds. So this is a great example of a way to start a book. I've been thinking about this, and the hook isn't the first sentence. The hook is the first page, and you can't stop reading this, and it's crazy. So they're kind of, to the best of my knowledge, are from the South, so I'm going to try to do that justice. Here we go. Tom, no answer. Tom, no answer. What's gone with that boy, I wonder? You, Tom, no answer. The old lady pulled her spectacles down and looked over them about the room. Then she put them up and looked under them. She seldom or never looked through them for so small a thing as a boy. They were her state pair, the pride of her heart, and were built for style, not service. She could have seen through a pair of stove lids just as well. She looked perplexed for a moment, and then said, not fiercely, but still loud enough for the furniture to hear, excuse me, well, if I lay, I lay if I get a hold of you all. She did not finish, for by this time she was bending down and punching under the bed with the broom. This genius description, punching under the bed with the broom. And so you can imagine it. And so she needed breath to punctuate the punches with. She resurrected nothing but the cat, which is also hilarious. I never did see the beat of that boy. She went to open the door and stood in it and looked out among the tomato vines and jimson weeds that constituted the garden. No Tom. She lifted up her voice at an angle calculated for distance and shouted, "You, Tom!" There was a slight noise behind her, and she turned just in time to seize a small boy by the slack of his roundabout and arrest his flight. Such an 1800 sentence. Arrest, right? Look at that word, arrest, that verb. There, I might have thought of that closet. What you been doing in there? Nothing. Nothing. Look at your hands, and look at your mouth. What is that truck? Well, I don't know, Aunt. Well, I know it's jam, that's what it is. 40 times I've said to you, if you didn't let that jam alone, I'd skin you. Hand me that switch. The switch hovered in the air. The peril was desperate. My, look behind you, Aunt. The old lady whirled around and snatched her skirts out of danger. The lad fled on the instant, scrambled up the high board fence, and disappeared over it. His Aunt Polly stood surprised for a moment, and then broke into a gentle laugh. This is so genius and wonderful and awesome. So, a lot of good things out there in the classics. If you're only reading the new stuff, cool beans. New authors need money. Old authors don't. If they're written like 200, I'm not saying people who are old writing books. I'm saying books 100 plus years old. No one's collecting royalty except for Puffin Classics and whoever printed this, Dover Publications. But anyway, absolute genius. Read something old this week just for kicks and giggles. Think about your theme. Think about what your audience cares about. That's my challenge for us this week. I had one of my writing friends say that I should sign off by saying right in the raw. I don't know why I just picture someone at like a typewriter without pants on. I just can't. So put on pants, right in the raw, and we'll see you guys next time.